G'day everybody, my name is Elliot Waters and you're listening to the Dysregulated podcast. As always, thank you for tuning in. Alright, so this is actually the second episode, can you believe it, that I've recorded this evening or tonight. So let me give you a bit of context into what's been going on. So I just recorded an episode down at Newcastle Beach where I do a lot of deep thinking because I'm back in Newcastle, or I have been for the weekend. And there's been a lot going on inside of my mind, which is nothing unusual. But there's been particular themes that keep popping up and have been popping up for a little bit. And I just recorded an episode that went for an hour of me just walking up and down the beach, reflecting on some of my thoughts when it comes to these themes and issues, right? So I'm driving right now. I'm just leaving the beach now because it's starting to rain and it's getting pretty late, and I've got to leave tomorrow back in the truck to go do a pickup in Sydney, and then I think I'm taking it back to Wodonga. I don't know, but that's the nature of transport. Shifting sands, things tend to change a lot. Anyway, but what just happened before was that I was doing this episode on the beach. Like I said, that's where I've done a lot of deep thinking, and this was a particularly deep episode. And it was very true, or it is very true, to how I'm feeling at the moment. But the thing is, I just reflected on it then. I'm like, I don't know. It's very negative, which, look, that's fine, mostly. But I am a bit concerned that people who listen to it, who are also battling mental illness, and maybe have similar sort of thoughts deep down as what I was expressing in this episode. I don't know. Maybe it'd be a bit triggering for people because it painted a pretty bleak picture of the future. But then I don't know. Like, it's how I'm feeling, so I'm not sure. It's a real tough one because I don't want to make people feel worse about their own situations. That's for sure. That is certainly not the point of what I'm trying to do. But at the same time, you know what the show is like. You've been listening to it. And I say it all the time that there is no, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I'm aware, there's no show or podcast on the internet or anything that goes as deep into the world of mental illness and what's like living with it than the Dysregulated podcast. And I stand by that statement. And it's a promise that I have made to you guys, and I talk about a lot, that I am going to produce content that offers insights that nobody else, well, I was going to say nobody else can, but nobody else does. I think we all can, but not all of us maybe for whatever reason, although, confidence is something I don't really have. But when it comes to this sort of stuff, I just don't care. I just go for it and say everything. And I'm glad that I do. But at the same time, I've got to be careful because I don't want to make people feel worse. I want people to feel maybe more understood. I want people that maybe don't understand mental illness personally to feel as though they get it a bit more because of listening to my experiences and my insights. And that's what I'm trying to do, is to get people either to understand that they're not alone going through these things, and maybe for other people to understand on some level, to some degree, what it's like for other people who are going through these things. So this episode is particularly, the one I'm talking about that I did just before, is particularly like, I said through it a lot because it goes for an hour and I think I was waffling on a little bit, but at the same time, it is a reflection of how I've been thinking and how I do think, because I think obsessively. I get into these negative loops and I just keep going around and around and around. And when I record these episodes, I try not to fall into that trap too much, because although, that's how I do think, and I want to accurately portray my thoughts as genuinely, as honestly as possible, it's still got to be in a way that people are able to listen to it and sort of want to listen to it, or else, what's the point? And I don't know. See, at the end of episodes, I always get this negative feeling, this wave. It's like I snap out of the disassociation that I was in, just talking about, the deepest things that I think about. and experience. And I sort of snap out of it, and I never finish an episode and go, man, I reckon that was pretty good. I'm happy with that. I'm happy that I spoke about those things. All is good. I've done well. I've done the podcast proud and myself. I just don't think those things. And when I finish them, my first thoughts are always, that was garbage. That sucked because of this. I didn't say this properly. But, the inner critic stuff, all that sort of stuff. But ordinarily, I'm able to just go, you know what, it's almost like closing my eyes and just going, right, I'm just pressing the button, I'm pressing submit, I'm doing it. And then, I never listen to them again because I struggle to get past the negativity. Unfortunately, it lingers. But, people's feedback, thank you everybody that provides the positive feedback. I use that as evidence to push back against my inner critic and say, no, this content, this stuff I'm talking about is important and it has value. And, to some degree, it's helping people understand themselves, helping people understand others, those they care about, all that sort of stuff. Keep doing it, Elliot, because even if you don't believe it, the evidence from others, which is far more objective, is saying you're doing a good thing. Keep it up. So, but this episode, I don't know, I just feel as though I waffled, which I can, like episodes I do, well, I'm probably doing it now, but it felt a bit clunky. Again, though, often, ordinarily, I can sort of absorb that criticism from the self or from my inner critic, because it's like, yeah, maybe it was clunky, maybe I did waffle a bit, but like that's how I think, that's how my psyche works, my mind, my brain, and it's like, that's what this podcast is about. It's me expressing what it's like for me living with mental illness. This is my journal at its most fundamental level. So that's all part of the deal. And I'm pretty confident that people don't tune in to this podcast expecting a polished performance, a really professional, squeaky clean, edited, I don't edit anything, podcasts. I don't think people expect that. I don't think people want that, because that's not what this is about. It's about being all those things that I keep going on about, being raw, being real, honest, genuine, authentic, all that sort of stuff, and fair dinkum. But the thing that has got me a bit worried about this episode is the fact that it's quite negative. And, I think I'm saying things that others who are in similar situation, I think other people's inner critics may tell individuals the same things as I was saying, but the way I said it was quite compelling, I think. And I made the point pretty clear that I feel as though my destiny, my fate has been sealed, and a lot of it is going to be disappointing in the long run. And unfortunately, I'm going to miss out on a lot of those, I guess, fundamental human experiences that everyone around me seems to be able to have. And for those that have listened to the show, you could probably guess I could tell you what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, relationships, partners in crime, someone to go on this journey with, having a family, children, the stuff that evolution biology says is in many ways the meaning of life, and I am pretty certain that these things that I don't think some people would take it for granted, but, like most people expect that these things in their life will happen. And I think for most people it seems to. But, I don't believe those things are going to happen for me. I don't. Maybe I'm going to do a different version of the episode I just recorded before. I don't know. Now I'm starting to get into it. Let's see. As I drive around Newcastle late at night, just reminiscing as I drive past places that reminds me of past relationships, and not all the memories around here are good, that's for sure. Anyway, what was I saying? Yes, those fundamentals. So I was making the argument that my meaning and purpose that I've chosen to pursue with everything I've got, right, is about, my two passions of mental health and transport, the road transport industry, and putting them together and trying to do what I can to change or at least help people live the best lives they can, for those people that are going through stuff that I'm going through, or things that maybe I'm able to relate to and empathise with and have the skills and the ability to maybe come up with some ways to help people with these battles, because not only I'm going through a lot of similar battles as well, but, I've got a degree in psychology. I've done a lot of, I'm a researcher in psychology. I don't have to go through all the things that I am trying to do in the space. But, and also the main thing is basically that I feel as though I do actually have a voice, which is not something that people who are battling mental illness necessarily believe. And I've met so many people. Geez, this episode as well is going way off track. But anyway, I don't care. I'm going to it and I'm going to upload this one. I don't care. All right. I'm saying that more to myself, but still, this is going to happen. But I've met a lot of people in hospital, great people. Just about everyone I've met. In fact, I've never met a bad person in hospital in the psychiatric wards, and maybe there are fundamentally bad people, although I don't know if that's true. I think people's life experiences and stuff mould you a certain way, and I think, we all start off as good people and then things happen and people respond to that, and sometimes it's not in ways that's very nice to other people. But, anyway, what I'm saying is that just about everybody, if not everybody I've met in hospital, are good people, are fighters, are unbelievably resilient, and certainly have not chosen to be in the predicament that they're in. None of us are in psychiatric wards going, man, even me, even though I'm obsessed with mental health and psychology and stuff, I've never been in psychiatric wards thinking, man, this is unreal. I'm so lucky to be here. Maybe if I was there as a researcher or something in a professional capacity, yeah, maybe, but, that hasn't happened. I've been in there because I've been a patient, because I've been at the point where the fight has got so difficult that I needed help, or else, the fight would probably end. So thank goodness for the psychiatric wards. Well, I guess from that point of view, I have been lucky to be able to be in psych wards, but, you're not there laying in bed thinking this is unreal, this is awesome, I'm having a great time, even if you do realise that it's the safest and the best place to be. Right, so anyway, back to the point that I'm trying to make, if I can remember it, is that I've met, like I said, great people, fighters who have unbelievable stories, and there's so much to learn from them. But the problem is, the vast majority never believed, at least at that point, that their voice mattered or that they had one at all, because the mental illnesses like depression and anxiety, and then others as well, like, the personality disorders and whatever, schizophrenia, these mental illnesses, they certainly aren't trying to build you up, They're trying to convince you in their own particular way, and they're all very successful at this. They're trying to convince you that you don't have a voice, that your voice doesn't matter, and your experiences, your lived experience, has no value, and that's why you end up in hospital, because that message gets too loud, too strong. It sounds too, logical, at least in that moment. And it's like, right, no, I don't have a voice. But let me tell you, everybody in there, like I said, the lived experience in psychiatric wards, so much can be learnt, so much can be, the insights, it's just, unbelievable. But it's so sad because, like I said, pretty much everybody except for me somehow didn't believe that they had a voice, or if they did believe they had a voice, it didn't matter. So what was the point of using it, which is just heartbreaking. And I don't know why I have, believe that I do have a voice and that it is worthy if I'm able to be in a position to be able to use it. That's the thing, I guess, where the difference, or one of the differences that I saw was that, I believe, like I said, that I did have a voice and it mattered. It was more about the fact that I wasn't able to use it because of all these negative forces within my mind that wouldn't allow me to speak, But that's a bit different than what I was saying a lot of other people seem to experience that I met, It's different. It's subtle, but it's different. And I think it's that difference as to why I guess I've gone on to, make this podcast and be a presenter for the Black Dog Institute and do my degree and work in psychological research and, use my voice in that capacity, offering lived experience insights and having that belief that what I have to say is valuable and may help people. I don't know. It's weird, isn't it? It's weird. I don't know if I've ever thought about it that clearly like I have just then. It's amazing what comes to mind when, you start rambling on a bit, because let me tell you right now, this is not the direction in which I thought this episode was going to go. But like I said, who cares? Whatever happens here is getting published. So here we go. You know how every episode there's always a point where I completely forget where I'm up to, and I blame my ADHD for that, which I think is a sound, assumption or logical belief on that. But happens every episode just about, and it's just happened again. I've got no idea why I was talking about my voice. Anyway, don't know. It may come back to me. I may circle back around to it. Let's see. Let's press on. So the point of this episode, what was I doing this episode for? Oh, yes, because I just did an hour-long ramble about what I've been thinking about lately, and it's quite negative, as most of my sort of thinking is, especially at the moment. And I am concerned that instead of offering insights and people may come away from this episode feeling worse about themselves, and that's not what I want. But it's hard because I'm not going to lie to people. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I'm going to tell you the truth, of what's going on. I'm not going to sugarcoat things, but to the extent that it doesn't impact people in a significant negative way, because that's the last thing I want to be doing. And that, as you can imagine, I'm sure that is it's a tough line to tread. And I don't know, there might have been episodes, you guys would know better than me, because once I record them, I never listen to them again because I'm too embarrassed, really. And I always have this belief, like I said earlier, that they're no good. But did I say that in this episode or the one previous? Anyway, whatever. So maybe there have been other episodes where you guys have come away from it thinking, geez, that makes me feel like garbage. And I hope that's not the case. But I've been a little bit worried from my walk from Newcastle Beach to the car that maybe that's what this episode was going to do for people. But I don't know. What can I say? I've been thinking a lot about the fact that I'm not going to get married. I'm not going to meet that life partner to share memories with and then have a happy, beautiful little family of children that are amazing and maybe don't think like their father does, but of course are very empathetic as they get older for people with mental health concerns. That I would have made sure of that if it was going to be a reality. But that's the thing, I don't believe now that's going to happen. And instead of trying to shy away from that belief, that potential truth, like I've been doing for a long time, now at the point where I'm turning back towards it, I'm trying to accept it. I guess that's the transition that's been going on lately. And the reason for that transition is in a big way, is because of my absolute pursuit of my meaning and purpose, which is the transport and the mental health stuff. But as you would be aware if you've listened to the episodes recently, I've started this new job, right, in transport, driving trucks, and moving to Wodonga. And what I'm discovering every day is I'm in a truck for 12 hours or more, and I don't have an opportunity to meet people. Like, there's no chance of me going on a date with somebody because I don't have time. If I'm not working big hours, I'm so tired that if I did go on a date, I wouldn't be in the mood to anyway because I feel like garbage. And even if I was in the mood, I think I'd be too tired to be able to put on a bit of a show and present the best version of me. I just don't think it's possible at the moment. One, because I don't have the time, and that's the main thing. But two, even if I did, which I don't think I'd have the capacity to be able to do it. At least not in a way that would make someone think, hey, this Elliot guy, not only is he a hottie, but he's so unique. I just can't, he's just amazing. And speaking of the hottie thing, like you should see, well, there's a photo that I posted on the podcast Instagram and Facebook page that you can have a look at of me doing a podcast interview actually recently. That's pretty much why I'm back in Newcastle. And I look so tired. I look so rough. And that's because I am tired and feeling rough. Because working in transport, especially for the company that I work for, I chose this particular company because this is the toughest of the tough, and I know and knew when I started that if I could make it work at this joint, then I am a good operator. And that's a big part of what I'm trying to achieve. I want to be a great operator. And to do that, you got to really extend yourself. And my God, am I extending myself? Like I look rough. I look haggard. I look really tired because I am. And, I just don't see the potentiality for me to be able to meet somebody. And even if I did meet them, to be able to present the best version of me to keep someone interested. I just don't think it's possible. And I knew that when I decided to go back into transport, to drive trucks and to do the industry properly and choose the company that I did. I knew that by accepting that I was going back into it and I was going to throw everything at this meaning and purpose of the mental health and the transport and then putting it together, I was sort of accepting my fate, my destiny, that it meant that the idea of a wife and a family, just, that was it. That was the end. I was signing off any chance of that happening. And I wouldn't say I've been exactly comfortable with that, but I don't think I've really had a choice. For a while, it felt like leading up to making this decision and deciding to move to Wodonga, which again, that in itself is difficult because I've moved to a place where I don't know anybody. And in order to meet people and know people and get friends and all that sort of stuff, and then maybe meet someone for a relationship, like you gotta be able to get out there and meet people, and I can't do that. And it's one thing if I chose to work for a company here in Newcastle, because at least then if I was able to do something outside of work, well, I'm in Newcastle and I know people, and hopefully I'd be able to do something that way. But let's not forget, I've been in Newey since I last moved back, since I lived in Manchester in the UK for 6 months. Like, that was years ago now, and I haven't really met anyone. So, it's not happening anyway. But it certainly is difficult when you move to a place where you don't know anybody, you've got no social connections at all, and then you're working in a job that doesn't really allow you any time to be able to do any of those things, even if you could. And if you are afforded the time, you're too tired anyway to have the energy to be bothered to be able to do anything about that sort of stuff. So I knew that this was all going to happen, and I knew I just about sealed my fate, and that I was saying goodbye to any chance of getting those things, partners, families, and even like meeting friends and stuff. So that's the thing, right? I'm back in Newcastle and, I haven't seen anybody. Well, sorry, that's not true. I've seen my family, which is great, but, I haven't seen any of my friends, any of my mates. And that's also part of the reality of working in the transport industry, which is why I want to try and do something for the mental health of operators and truckies and forkies doing night shift and stuff, because this is the reality. The demands of the industry, it's not just a job, and you sacrifice so much to keep the wheels turning. It's so hard on people, and it's been so hard on me. And coming back home to Newey, which is the first time in a couple of weeks that I have, I haven't been able to see people because everyone else is living their lives, which is having wives and families of their own. And, I can't, people aren't able to just be able to drop everything and just, Ellie's back for 2 days, I'll go see him. Like, it just doesn't happen. which is all right. Well, like it's like I don't have any bad feelings towards me mates and stuff that I'm not able to see for whatever reason. And a lot of it too is because also, again, I'm so tired. Like it's hard for me to make the effort myself, even if the opportunities presented themselves. But the reality is of doing this work and chasing this meaning and purpose, these two passions of mine, is that part of the sacrifice is friendships, social connections, the opportunity to find a partner if you don't have one already as you go into the industry or back into the industry like I am. And therefore, it's also very difficult to create a family. It's near impossible the way I see it anyway. So that realization that essentially by doing or pursuing what I am is going to just about ensure and lock in a future of mine where I miss out on those, you could say, human fundamental experiences, that is a bitter pill to swallow. And although I think I've made the right decision by pursuing this meaning and purpose, like you got to pursue your meaning and purpose, I guess the broader issue there is the fact that my meaning and purpose, the scope is not broad enough that it includes a family and a partner and all that sort of stuff and seeing mates all the time and hanging out and having a strong social connection to people, because my belief that I can get those things has dissipated thanks to my mental illnesses. And so over the years, I've stripped my meaning and purpose back to being very defined indeed, to the point where now it is so defined that I know exactly where I want to go, but it doesn't include the potential for any of those things. It's gone. They're not within the scope of my meaning and purpose, which means if I do pursue my meaning and purpose with everything I've got, which I think we all should do, but that's the thing, if it's so defined and it's stripped away, things like that, well, you don't have the energy or the capacity to pursue those things because it's not within the framework that you're working towards. It's just not an option. Now, you could say, well, Elliot, why don't you broaden the scope of your meaning and purpose to include those things again? And I guess this is the point I was making in the episode where I got a bit concerned about making people feel worse. That I'm not going to tread lightly because this is important. This is, such a core thought that I have, a core theme that produces such strong emotions. And it's something that, I do sort of believe, and I'm not seeing evidence to the contrary. And that is that my complex mental health, my complex psyche, my mind, my brain, and the differences that there are compared to the norm or the average, I think those differences, you could say deficiencies, you could say defectiveness, qualities, parts of my minds that don't operate in a way that is optimal. You know what I mean? The fact I've got autism, the fact I've got borderline personality disorder, chronic social anxiety, chronic generalized anxiety, which is so limiting. All of that is, OCD, these obsessive thoughts I can't get rid of that I've spoken about on the podcast at length. All the other disorders that I can't even, ADHD, the recurrent depressive episodes, the bipolar type 2 diagnosis, all of these things. These are the qualities, these are the influences on my mind and my behaviour and my emotions and my thoughts. I am now at the point where I don't believe there is the option for me to have those things that I would really like, a wife, children. I don't think those things they're not going to happen for me. That's the realisation I guess I've come to. And that's why they've been stripped away out of my meaning and purpose. Because, years ago, my meaning and purpose was all about, I can still visualise what I was trying to manifest my wife to look like, my children to look like, what we would be doing, the work I'd be doing, all that sort of stuff as well. But it was all centered around the family unit. And unfortunately, over the years, a lot of failed relationships. There's a lot of broken hearts there. My heart has been broken multiple times. And, looking back, not all of it was my fault, but a lot of it, the majority, can be linked just about directly to these mental illnesses and these negative dark forces that occupy my mind. Okay? That's the reality of things. And it's a good thing in some ways. I've come to the point where I'm accepting it, but it's also really difficult because that is not something you want to have to accept. That's a terrible, conclusion to come to. And it's even worse when, you now believe that with just about all of the logical capacity, thinking wise mind, if we want to think DBT, dialectical behaviour therapy stuff, my wise mind says, you know what, Elliot, there's a lot of evidence that would suggest that what you're saying here is true. And unfortunately, not everybody gets to experience those amazing things, right? Now, I'm not saying if you also are, and I know many of you listening will be, if you are also afflicted with mental illnesses, that doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to have to come to the same conclusions that I have. It's just, this is a very case-by-case thing. And look, to be honest, I could be wrong. I may look back, if I do continue with this belief and I do turn away from any chance or any efforts to getting these things, I may look back and go, you know what? I think I was actually wrong on that, but unfortunately, then I would have massive regrets and be like, holy dooly, I've missed my chance. See, I don't know, that's really scary as well. God, that scares me. That if that's what turns out, I actually go, you know what? I did do a lot of, this is true too, I think. I did do a lot of therapy. I've done so much work on the self. I'm not the same person in the sense that I'm not unstable. I don't mean that in like a violent, unstable way, but, emotionally dysregulated like I still am, but not like I was, And that's true, actually. I have done so much therapy. I've taken so many medications. And, I've done so much research. I've done so much work on myself, away from anyone else. So much thinking, and like this podcast, for example, has been a huge part of me moving forward in a way that is not as destructive to the self like it was previously. And you know what? Now I'm sort of thinking the other way. That's all true. That's definitely true. There's no part of me that doesn't believe any of that. I am a lot more stable, I guess, than I used to be. I am. Don't get me wrong. Like we know, there's some pretty dark thoughts that still occupy my mind big time. There is so much anxiety, so much. And here comes the negative way of thinking again. A lot of my relationship issues have been linked to... So a lot of my relationship issues in relationships has been linked to borderline personality disorder, right? Now, BPD, very quickly, does act differently whether you're in a relationship or if you're not. And it's a bit hard to tell how much progress has been made as far as the BPD in a relationship stuff is concerned unless you test it out. And the thing is, I haven't had the opportunity to test it out. I'm quite confident that things are different. I really am. I am. But again, I haven't actually had the opportunity to test this theory. And therefore, I can't say with complete certainty that that's actually the case. And that is something that plays on my mind a bit, because it's like, God, if I get in a relationship again, I'm actually wrong. Like, I can't go through that again. I even said today to my family, I was like, because, they were asking if I was seeing anyone down in Wodonga, and I said, no, I don't have time for that or the energy, like I just said before. But I said to him, I don't know if I could even try a relationship again. Every relationship I've been in, I've ended up in hospital, through no fault of my ex-girlfriends, by the way. But it's true, and it's like, do I take that risk again? And the problem is, and this is something I've spoken about at length on previous episodes, but I'll say it very briefly again, which is BPD is the disorder which most affects the people around the individual who's got it. You tend to drag people down with you if you're not careful, or if you're not able to. Well, that's the thing. It's a mental illness, isn't it? Like, that's what happens. And God, I tried to avoid that so many times. That's why I used to go to hospital often in the relationships, because I was like, doctors, you got to help me so you can help them, my partner, my girlfriend. But unfortunately, that never really happened. So anyway, what was it? Oh, here we go. What was I saying again? Yeah. So I don't actually know for sure that like my BPD is in remission, but I'll tell you what, I've done so much work that I reckon I reckon it would be, but I don't know for sure. And so BPD is what impacts in the relationship the most. But to be honest, what impacts me getting into one, so when I'm outside of one but wanting one, I've now discovered is autism. And as a sub-component of the broader autistic spectrum disorder, it's this social anxiety disorder as well. Because I'm petrified of meeting, even though I've been able to do it in the past, and I'll explain why I think that is in a minute. Generally speaking, though, even back in the day, I've just been so scared of social interactions in general. But you can imagine what it's like talking to a girl and trying to put on a bit of a show. Like, man, that stuff is it just petrifies me, and it still does. But here's the thing, right? As I've said, I've been in relationships before, and I'm going to have to do so much. At the end of this episode, I'm going to explain what I want to do moving forward with the podcast, right? Because I have gone away a bit from the formula that I wanted to stick to. And I'll explain that at the end, all right? And it's got to do with going back and talking about, for example, these relationships I keep referring to. But what was I saying? So talking to girls and stuff, trying to present the best version of you and having the belief that you're someone that's worthy of being, that someone might actually be attracted to you. Like, that is such a difficult concept to accept. And then it's a difficult concept to pretend that I accept, at least enough that I can fool myself into acting out what it is I believe, I need to be doing to make it count. Now, in the past, I was able to do that on a few occasions, like, for all the negativity I talk about when it comes to girlfriends and attracting people and stuff, look, I'll be honest, I've had quite a few girlfriends, and I've had, this is my lack of self-esteem, this is why I'm doing this, but I've had a fair few romantic partners, I'm well into double figures, and I'm more, 20s or 30s, anyway, that's not important. That is not important, Elliot, stop it. That does not matter at all. But what I'm saying is that in the past, I had been able to every now and then push past this belief that I'm defective and still, I guess, in some way, make it count, whatever that means, but including getting into relationships. Now, the thing is, though, this was before I knew I had autism. I knew I was different, but I didn't know I had autism. This was before. Again, this episode's going off track, but hey, this is what I've been thinking about. This is before I had the insight that I do now, the awareness of my condition or conditions, how these conditions affect my thoughts, my behaviours, my emotions, how I feel the world, how I perceive things, all that sort of stuff, right? So, I always knew the thing, I was a bit different, but I didn't realise maybe how different. Whereas now I am acutely aware because of the amount of insight I now have because of the work I've done on myself. Okay, stick with me. Okay, this is an important point. Because now when I think about trying to, find a chicky babe to talk to and try and, cast my spell over him. Oh, geez, that's cringe, but you know what I mean? I can't push past the idea anymore that I'm different because I now know how different I am. I know in very fine graphic detail, unbelievably detailed, how I am different to others in how I act and behave and my emotions, all that sort of stuff, and how I think. All right. So now that I am, instead of having a hunch that I'm different, but being pretty sure about it, I now know 100% that I'm different. And I also know that some of these differences are not actually very good, okay? And a lot of them I wish I didn't have. And the fact that I now know this so acutely, it is so hard to be able to push past that knowledge and be able to believe on some level that I'm worthy and then act that out. I just can't do it anymore. I can't do it. I can't, because the whole time my inner critic that is emboldened, unfortunately, is saying to me, and maybe it's imposter syndrome too, the being an imposter trying to act out that I'm someone worthy. So maybe it's those two of my foes once again. I'm being emboldened and saying, mate, what are you doing? You got no chance. You're a weirdo. You're different. You're not cut out for this life. You know that. You know that. And you also know how these relationships tend to end up. So, don't do it, mate. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know if I can push past those beliefs anymore, because I'm pretty sure they're actually right. I'm also pretty sure that I'm not, though, there are qualities that I've got, because I do believe I'm a good person now, which is great. But I just don't think it's enough to overcome my awareness of my situation. Which leads to another point, which I'm not going to talk about in this episode, but I'm going to talk about in another one, which is insight is great, but I think for some people you can have too much insight into your condition. And I'm going to talk about that in a future episode, because I think that's me, and I have a lot of trouble with the level and the detail and the depth of insight that I have. Because I think I've gone to the point where I've overcooked it a bit and now it's backfiring a little bit. Anyway, that's for another episode. And don't get me wrong, I think insight is unbelievably important, and without it, you can't, get to a point where you can formulate a way forward and a way that gets you away from these mental illnesses. And put them into remission. I don't think you can do that without insight. But, if you're obsessed with your own predicament like I am, I think, and this doesn't apply for everybody. This definitely doesn't apply for everybody. So, I've got to be careful. That's what I mean. Don't think, well, Elliot reckons insight is actually the devil's work. I don't want to know anything about what I'm going through. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying, though, is if you do think like me and you get so obsessed and you get stuck on these loops, and for years I was obsessed with gaining more and more and more insight into my situation, maybe you can overcook it. But that's the same for everything, In many ways, the key to life, and this is another episode I'll be doing soon, is balance. Balance, right? Everything's got to be balanced. You can have too much or too little of things, and you got to find that balance. And I think, insight, like everything, is the same. You got to have a balance there. And unfortunately, people like me, I don't do balance very well. I tend to live at the extremes. And, this is just another example of living at the extremes, another facet of life where I've overcooked it. Anyway. So what I'm saying is, that's why I've stripped away girlfriends and families and partners and all that stuff from my meaning and purpose, because I don't think it's attainable. So why waste energy on trying to achieve these things when it's not going to happen? So divert those energies into the things that can happen. And that is being the best mental health advocate I can be, which includes this podcast. It includes, being able to be involved and conduct research into psychology that actually helps people and changes people's lives, hopefully for the better. It involves getting back into the transport industry and being the best operator I can be, and being extremely knowledgeable about the industry and somebody that people look to understand transport and what it's like, and all the different things involved. That is something I think I can achieve, because I am fixated on the industry. It's one of my autistic fixations, just like mental health and psychology is. These are the avenues, the facets I think I can actually succeed in. And I do believe that if I can keep it all under control. So, that's where, when I'm thinking rationally or trying to and taking emotion out of things, although that's hard, that's where I'm trying to focus and put all my energies towards, because I think that stuff is attainable. And unfortunately, for the reasons I just outlined, I don't think the relationship stuff and the family stuff is attainable. Now, don't get me wrong. That is like I said, a horrendous conclusion to come to. And this is a me thing, right? Again, just because you're going through mental illness yourself potentially, that doesn't mean that these things are out of reach automatically, right? That's not true. That is, oh God, so many people that have had battles, this is partly why I'm so depressed about it, is because I know of people, and I know of people, like stories that I've seen, we all know that there's people that have had unbelievable mental health battles, and a lot of the reasons why they're able to get through it is because they've got someone by their side that sticks with them. Or one of the amazing things that comes from being able to overcome these struggles is that they are able to find a partner and have a family. This is so, it happens all the time. Not for everybody though, but it does happen. So I didn't say it's in the previous effort that I created that I was waffling on, and I'm probably doing that again. But so don't think for a second that I'm saying, oh, well, if you've got depression or if you've got even BPD, well, you're not getting in a relationship. That is not true at all. That is not true, okay? But for me, I think it is true. I've actually, come to think of it, I think I've said this on a previous episode before, I think, that the flavour of my psyche, my mind, my brain, the fact that there are so many disorders and they all fit, in particular the BPD and the autism, how they both manifest themselves within me, I think that has unfortunately sealed my fate on this. But that is very unique to me. It's not just me. I'm not going to sugarcoat these things. Okay. I've met people that, appear as though they're also not going to, get these things in life. But there's also there's so many stories of people that have got mental illness or have had mental illness, that still are in loving relationships. So I want to make that clear, right? I want to make that clear. This is reflecting on me and how at least I respond cognitively and how I think about the self in light of my personal struggles with mental illness, all right? So, all right, I think I've made that point clear, okay? But that is, I guess, the point that I'm at. I don't believe that I'm able to get these things, so I've been trying to strip away any thoughts, efforts, emotions, being invested in this stuff. But, that's pretty hard to do when you're someone who believes they've got a lot of love to give, And I do. I've spoken about this a lot before, and I still believe that. It's not that I don't think if I was able to be given the opportunity again that, well, not be given the opportunity, but, get the opportunity again to really showcase the love that I can give. Because in my relationships previously, I had a lot of love to give. The problem is the strength, the intensity of the love that I had fueled the BPD patterns and cycles. But in saying that, the love was there, and I, unbelievable. And I believe if I'm able to try again, and the BPD stuff was under control, I would make someone pretty bloody happy, I reckon. Because I'm a good catch when I'm operating as I want to be and as I should be and can when things are going well. It's when things don't go well and the spiral and the patterns kick in is when the problems present themselves, but that is a expression of mental illness, not an expression of Elliot Waters. You know what I mean? And that's also why it's so bloody hard to reconcile with this, because it's not Elliot Waters that I think is the problem, you know? I'm not stripping away relationships and everything that goes with it from my meaning and purpose and what I'm aiming to achieve in life, because Elliot Waters is not cut out for it, or Elliot Waters is a bad person and shouldn't, you know, inflict himself on other people. It's not that at all. Elliot Waters is an absolute legend, all right? I said it, right? Elliot's great. It's when the mental illnesses corrupt Elliot Waters through no fault of his own, that's when the issues arise. And I'm also aware that right now, as I'm talking and saying that I'm giving up on all this stuff, again, that could be and probably is the mental illness is corrupting me again. But what can I say? They're illnesses. You know, you can't turn them on and off. It is what it is. And I'm still battling. As we know, every day is a battle. And the last couple of weeks have been a real battle about this whole topic. So, right. So what was I saying? Fair income, waffling on. But I think this is good content. You tell me, all right? If this is good content, please let me know, all right? Now, I'm going to finish maybe on this, okay? Because coming back to Newcastle, as I'm driving around right now, and the rain's starting, so it's, you know, it's sort of nice, but it's also, you know, this is when the real deep brain juices are flowing, when it's late at night, like so many of these episodes are when I record them. A lot of them are in the car, and a lot of them are recorded when it's pretty grim weather too, funnily enough. The conditions are just right. But coming back to Newcastle has been more difficult again, because there's a lot of memories here, a lot of good memories, but there's a lot of memories that hold a lot of negative emotion, and a lot of them have to do with my mental illness battle, of course, but relationships and the end of relationships and everything that has gone with that. So coming back to Newcastle has been hard because of that. Coming back to Newcastle has been hard because I haven't seen any of my friends, which is also part of this story, right? It's not just, although I'll focus a lot on relationships and family, it's also social connections as far as my friends go. You know, I feel as though I'm losing, and I've been losing contact with friends for years, and a lot of that has been because my social capacity is getting worse as I get older. There's no two ways about it. My ability to hang out with people, it's getting worse and worse and worse. And I really wish it wasn't, because I don't want it to, but it is. And I know, unfortunately, that I'm losing contact with friends, and I guess I'm losing friends, you know? And every time I come back to Newcastle, if I've been away, I see friends less and less. And often I come back and I don't see friends at all. And that's happened again over the last few days. And again, I've got the awareness that this is happening. I don't know why my social capacity is getting worse as I'm getting older, because from a lot of the research and anecdotal stuff that I've read, you know, it shouldn't really be getting worse, because of, you know, there is the theory that for people with autism, you know, social interactions obviously are difficult and they're quite taxing, because essentially we act out, you know, how we believe we should, you know, act in these social situations, because we're never quite sure what it is we're doing. So it's hard work, all right? And it's only when we're really, really really close to people where the act is sort of dropped and you just be who you are. And for me, that's with me best friends for sure. But you know, there's only a select few people, like family and past partners and my best friends, I guess. But even now, because I'm not seeing family as much, I'm not seeing friends as much, like, I don't know, I feel as though I'm starting to have to act out even those closest to me. So every social interaction at the moment, it seems, and the trend is that this is happening more and more, is that every social interaction I'm having to act out at least parts of it, which is so taxing to my social capacity. And not only that, but I just don't have it in me anymore like I used to. I don't know why that is. I don't know, but that's a topic for another day. But yeah, that's just another thing that's been difficult coming back to Newcastle this time, and I've been thinking a lot about, is that like my friendships are, that I'm losing contact with so many people that have meant so much to me, and in many ways are the reason why I'm still here. Even those people I'm losing contact with, and it's like, damn, I'm going to be like alone soon. And that's part of the difficulties in going back into the transport industry like I am, because that is the life. Social isolation is huge in trucking, massive. It's one of the biggest issues that there is with the life of being a truck driver. And I knew that, and I've known that going into it. And that's partly something I guess I want to experience firsthand, although I am anyway. But this is accelerating the process and really hammering it home. But I want to experience it because when I do get resilient roadways up and running, and I do really get stuck into coming up with ways, hopefully, to help people in the industry improve their mental health, and a lot of it has got to do with social isolation. If I'm going to do it and be successful, which is tied up in my meaning and purpose, I need to be in the industry. I need to be a truck driver, I have to be, or else I can't understand what it's like, and I can't then be able to come up with ways to maybe help people, because I have to know it intimately, or else it ain't going to work. I've got to be in the trenches. I've got to be in the roadhouses. I've got to be in the truck on my own with my thoughts, because that's what people in the industry are going through right now. It's not something unique to me. But the thing is, it has been already so difficult because I'm already predisposed to this stuff. So the industry is just, not accelerating it, because it already is my reality, but it's like, giving it some dexamphetamine, you know what I mean? It's dialing up the intensity even more, and it's just belting me constantly. Social isolation, on your own, just your thoughts. It's like, whoa, man, and I asked for this. And this is the thing, like, for me to achieve what I want to achieve, which is to change the industry for the better, to change the community, the broader community for the better, to create psychological research that actually helps people, the people that are in the waiting rooms in the mental health hospitals right now, who need an answer, who need something to hold on to. They're the ones, because I have been that person, but they're the ones I think of all the time when I do what I do. And I know the sacrifices that I have to make to be able to achieve what I need to achieve so I can help people properly, and live a life where I'm not on my deathbed riddled with regrets, which, oh God, that is something that scares the absolute bejesus out of me. Again, a topic for another day, but you know what I mean? Like, there's no two ways about this. This meaning and purpose pursuit that I'm on, this pursuit in the mental health space and psychology, the objectives that I want to achieve, and the change in people's lives I want to achieve, and the transport stuff, being someone in the industry that is just so knowledgeable, that is just, solid, rock hard, and everyone's like, Elliot is a top operator. He knows so much of the industry, and he just is so, he's just one of those legends of road transport, But it's not just that too. It's obviously I want to combine both worlds, as we know, and then also change the transport industry and those in it for the better too. So all of that, this needs to happen. It has to. I'm sacrificing everything for this to happen. And part of that sacrifice is, it appears, friends, sacrificing friends, the opportunity to make new friends. I'm sacrificing the opportunity to have a relationship again and to have a partner in crime like I still really, unfortunately, really want. And to also have a family and do all that sort of stuff. And let me tell you, my inner child is not particularly happy about this. And I'm trying to convince my inner child that this is the right thing. That if I'm on my deathbed full of regrets, that is worse than anything else. And to be honest, if I'm got that much regret, like, I probably won't make a deathbed, you know what I mean? So I'm trying to convince my inner child that this is actually the way forward because of, like I've said, I don't know if I'm capable of achieving the relationship stuff, holding on to friends, all that stuff anyway because of my mental illnesses. And I also don't think it's a possibility if I'm to pursue my meaning and purpose properly, which I must because I have to succeed. I have to. Everything is riding on this, everything. But what I'm saying is the sacrifices are immense, unbelievably huge. But you know what? I look back in history at the people who have really changed the course of history, say, you know. And I guess that's what I'm trying to do in my own space. But, I am trying to do it in a pretty big way. I've got the objectives in the transport industry, but more broadly, I want to, at a national level, I want to create significant change. On a global level, if I can, I want to, I think what I've gone through, and all the things I've achieved, like my degree and all the obsessive research and trying to understand humans and myself, it's all building towards this, I feel. And I've got to give it everything I've got. I've got to. And I just think part of that equation is I've got to let go of, unfortunately, a lot of my friendships. I've got to let go of the dream of relationships and the rest that goes with it. And I don't have a choice because even if I felt as though I could broaden my scope and include those things, I don't believe that it's a viable option and it was ever an option really to begin with because of the way in which my mind operates. I just don't think it operates in a way that those deeply held wishes are possible. And as I said, my inner child is not particularly happy about that because my inner child, I've said before, but I'll remind you, really, really wants to meet someone, like a lovely lady's inner child, her younger self. And my inner child wants to be able to hold, oh man, it's emotional stuff, wants to hold hands with my beautiful partner's inner child and go down the road and with that innocence, just play with this other inner child and just play with and just enjoy being able to play and not have to worry about all the other garbage, all the other crap that I'm obsessed with and it has to be obsessed with because the older self doesn't stop yapping on about it and just going over and over the same stuff like I probably am right now. My poor inner child just wants to play and it wants to meet a nice friend, girl. There's nothing, this is innocent stuff. But when you're a kid and you've got a girlfriend, and it's all innocent stuff, but it's lovely. It's just beautiful. It's so pure, it's a different type of girlfriend, boyfriend sort of thing, but it's just beautiful. And it's what's in many ways being a kid's all about, and it's lovely. And my inner child is desperate to be able to do that again and do it for good. And I don't know, I guess I'm desperate to be able to make that happen for my inner child, but I don't have the belief anymore that I can do it. So, yeah. So anyway, that's basically what I've been sort of thinking about constantly over and over again. And although I think I've waffled unbelievably huge amounts in this episode as well, I don't really care. I'm going to publish this and I don't care because, this is how I think, as I've said. This podcast is all about being the most real, raw, genuine, authentic, vulnerable, fair income show on all of the internet. and to offer insights into the world of living with mental illness that no other show does, because that is my commitment to you. And that is my commitment to all that I've met and all that I've heard of their lived experiences, and the people who don't believe that they have a voice, even though I don't believe that for a second. But, all those people that have been told by their own inner critics that are fueled by these mental illnesses, which of course is a different makeup for everybody, but whether it's one or whether it's multiple, it doesn't matter. So many people I've met, their experiences are so rich in insight, and I know people would gain so much from it. But, if people don't believe they have a voice, well then, even if they do have one, they're not going to use it. And it's so sad. But for some reason, I do believe I have a voice and that there is value in what I say, even if maybe I don't package it in the way that I would like to, like the previous episode draft and even this one. But at the same time, the reason why I just go into the depths like I have on this episode and the other ones is because I feel like I have a responsibility to those that would love to be able to maybe do what I'm doing, but just don't believe they can and don't believe that anyone would care if they did anyway. And that ain't true, but look, I know that it's not that easy. It's not like, oh, Ellie says not true. Well then, I must, that must be the truth then. I'm not, I know that is, that's not how it works. I know that. But like I said, I have a voice. I believe there is meaning and value to it, and I'm going to use it because, I'm one of the lucky ones in that way. I truly am. So I'm using it. But as a result, because of my commitment to make this podcast so honest and open, some of these episodes, I'm aware, maybe go around in circles a bit, maybe. But I don't know. No one's ever actually said that to me. It's just this is me and being negative and just not believing I'm that good at anything. So I just think that most of these episodes are not very good. But hey, look, people listen, and that's unreal. And people provide me with such great feedback. And, I'm not silly enough to just disregard people's, that's rude, and that's not what I'm about. So, thank you to everyone that provides the positive feedback and listens, because all of that is evidence I use to push back against these negative thoughts. And that's why this podcast is still going. It's not because I think it's the best podcast in the world, even though when it comes to mental health, that is my aim and my promise to do everything I can to try and achieve that. But the reason I keep going really is because people listen and people seem to gain, a lot from it. So that's why I keep doing it. So thank you, everybody. I don't really know where that all came from, but hey, it's the truth. It is. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. So that's what I've been thinking, though. And like I said, coming back to Newcastle has been hard because I am reminded of all of this. It's sort of at least when I'm sort of away and I'm back in Wodonga and stuff, I'm a little bit detached from the fact that, obviously I know that being away is not really good for my social connections. But at the same time, I'm not seeing the fact that, I don't know, it's different. In Newcastle, it's all right, I'm in the place where I should be seeing people, but I'm not. Whereas at least when I'm in Wodonga, although I know obviously I'm not seeing people, I also know that I'm not in the place where I would. But when I come here, it's hang on, I'm in, this is where I should be hanging out with everyone and have done. And yet I don't see anybody. That's not good. That's not good. So yeah, it's difficult to come back home. Because and then I do come home and I look around and I see everyone around me seems to be doing all the things I'd love to be doing. The things that I've spoken about that I'm giving up on. And they're doing it in my hometown where I've always imagined that I would be doing it too. I go to Westfield Katara, for those that know, the shopping centre down the road. I've spent a lot of time at Westfield Katara, still Gardo to me. Anyway, Garden City as it used to be known when I was a kid growing up. I always sort of imagined that one day I'd be at Gardo with my own family going shopping. And I go there like I did today and it's just me. No, I'm not with any mates or anything like I used to be. It's just me. on my own, like most things I do now. It's all on my own, even when I'm back home. I don't know, that sucks. And it also sucks because my social capacity is at the point now where, try as I might, I just don't have it in me. And that's, on a fundamental level, that's almost worse. But anyway, it is what it is. All right, that'll do. I'm finishing up. That's it for this episode. Oh, very quickly, hold on, everybody. If you do listen to the show a lot, you want to listen to this. All right, this is important. Okay, very quickly, because I have, I've sort of been assessing lately the content in which the Dysregulated podcast has been all about recently, although I haven't put much content out, and I will be putting more out, I promise, once I get more comfortable in my job and I've got the energy to devote to it. Trust me, it's coming. But what I've noticed lately, very quickly, is that most of the episodes have been reflections on how I'm feeling currently and what's been going through my mind, around the time of deciding to record, like today's episode or tonight's episode. And I've gone away a little bit from the previous formula, which I really want to stick to, which is also talking about the theories of psychology, the research in psychology, and I guess, explaining it in a way that makes sense to people and it's real to people. It's not all just sciencey. My aim has been to relate and relay the information in a way that makes sense to what's like in the real world, living with this stuff. And, I think I've done a pretty good job of that. And it's something I really enjoy doing. And I really want to do it a lot more. And I'm pretty annoyed I haven't been able to. But this is the thing, right? Just about all these episodes I do, well, these reflection ones in particular, I don't prepare for them. I just hit record when I feel like I've got the impetus and the inspiration to do it, and I just go for it. And, I have a general idea of what I want to sort of talk about, but at the same time, as these episodes tend to go off in different directions, and that's just how these forms of episodes, these types, that's how they go, these reflections, because I'm speaking from the heart, I'm speaking from the deepest parts of my psyche, and even I don't always know, it's like I'm going in, the dark corners and crevices of my mind with a torch. And as I'm, being illuminated to what's going on in these dark, damp areas, I'm relaying it to you guys as I'm discovering it myself. So a lot of it is like, oh, didn't know that was going to come up, but there you go. And I think that's a good thing that I do that. Even if maybe the episodes are a bit clunky. I don't know. Is this just me being negative? I don't know. Anyway, but I still don't mind that I do that. And I think it's important that I do that, even if it isn't the most succinct, way of producing these episodes, because it is as real as it gets. It doesn't get any more real than this. It doesn't, It doesn't. And I stand by the fact that that is a great thing and it's important and people need to know these things. And I don't expect everyone to talk in the detail like I do about the darkest parts of their psyches, but at the same time, I'd like to think if I'm talking about it in such depth at such an extreme level, well, then maybe that'll normalise talking about it at more of a normal level, I guess, although I hate that word. So I'm happy that these episodes come out in some ways in the way that they do because, like I said, it's the most authentic and genuine and vulnerable way I think it can be done. And I'm not going to turn away from that, even if my inner critic says, you just yabber on and everyone probably gets bored of, you just yapping and yeah. So anyway, but what I'm saying, so I want to go back to talking about the science. I want to go back to explaining the disorders in ways in which that makes sense, that strips away all the academic stuff that isn't necessary for what it's like for people that are going through this stuff right now, or people that have friends or family that they're trying to look out for that are going through this stuff right now and who really want to understand what it's like living with mental illness, I want to be able to translate the research, the theories of psychology, the disorders and the clinical implications of these disorders and how they manifest themselves in people. I want to go back to talking about that stuff and explaining it to people, because I think I do a pretty good job of that from the feedback that I've got. And I know people want to improve their mental health literacy. So what I'm saying is, what I'm saying is, when I have the capacity again to do this stuff, it's coming back in a big way, okay? The reason why I haven't been able to do that is because that does require me to prepare episodes properly, because I'm not going to give you false information or only tell part of the story, because I'm not able to, I can't be bothered doing the research that's required. It's not that, I've got ADHD, right? For those of you with ADHD, I'm sure you're thinking, it's hard to sit down and do the legwork that's required before producing whatever it is you're trying to produce. That's a classic hallmark of ADHD, and I certainly succumb to it often. But at the same time, I'm lucky in the fact that my autism and my hyperfocus that is then driven with my ADHD, the autism likes to grab the hyperfocus and direct it where it wants to go. And luckily for me, my autism is fixated on psychology and mental health, as we know. Right, so I'm going to go back to that, the winning formula of that. So if you're listening and you're sort of thinking, come on, Elliot, can you talk about like mental health that's not just about you and what you're going through right now? Well, the good news is, trust me, I'm going back to it, all right? So hang on. I just got to get the energy and the time to be able to do it. And the other thing that I want to go back to, and I must, because if I'm going to explain my story properly, I need to explain my story properly, right? There is so much that has happened in my past that I haven't spoken about yet here on the Dysregulated podcast. And I don't know if you've noticed, but we're nearing 250 episodes, which is, I tell you, that's pretty cool. I might have a little party, a little celebration for episode 250, because that's pretty unreal. But the fact is, like, for example, I talk about my relationships in this episode. I don't know how many, I think I've had I have 5 girlfriends, right? I've had 5 girlfriends, 5 relationships that were legit, that have all unfortunately toppled over. And so much of my story centers on those lovely, wonderful individuals, the experiences that we shared, the good and the bad, the ramifications of the relationships and what came after, and the insights into my own psyche, and it all has led to the point that I'm at now. I've got to talk to you about these relationships. I don't know how to do it. I don't know if I should do it in like chronological order. I'm thinking maybe that is the best way. But I've got to do it. And I want to do it. It's just, I don't know, I guess I just got to do it. I've got to figure it out, get it in my head, what I want to say, what I want to achieve with it, because there's, a lot I could go on about. But I want to do it properly, and it needs to be done. And then there's other things, like, for example, which is related to one of my relationships, but even aside from that, for example, I've said very briefly, I think, before, that I lived in Manchester in the United Kingdom for 6 months on a university exchange. And this was before I had any diagnosis of ADHD, borderline personality disorder, bipolar type 2, OCD, autism, all of that. But it was the turning point. This 6 months in the United Kingdom, in Manchester, was the turning point for all of it, when everything changed. Everything changed. And I haven't gone through the Manchester experience yet. I already know what I'm going to call the episode. It's Manchester Madness. And, it is when I finally understood, what was going on, and that there was a lot going on that I didn't realise previously, and a lot of it wasn't good. And now I had no choice but to confront these things. So that episode's coming soon, because I'm ready to go with that one. Like that is huge, massive. But there's more than that. There's more to talk about when it comes to my time in the psychiatric wards. I want to go back to doing the psych ward stories. of my time in the wards. So I'm going to do more episodes on that. There's more episodes to do around my journal as well. The discharge papers. There's some more of the discharge papers to do. So all of these episodes that I've done previously that I've moved away from, I am going to return to them because I think the ones that I've, the series that I've done previously that I've sort of moved away from, but also going back to reflections on my past and everything that's happened and the events and the people and everything, I'm going back to that, all right? I'm going back to it because, well, partly the reason why I'm back to it is because my obsessive thought loops have been so stable, so chronic, but stable. Like the last couple of episodes, I've sort of spoken about the same sort of things from different angles, but, sort of the same sort of topics. So it's because that's what I've been preoccupied with. So until maybe I shift to something else that I'm preoccupied with, I think it's time to go back into my past, have a look at what has brought me to this point that I'm talking to you right now. It's time to go back into the research that has been conducted in psychology, the theories that have been produced, the mental disorders that have been discovered, that have been conceptualized, the clinical implications, the psychotherapies, the psychological interventions that are used for people. I'm going back to all of it. Like, for example, the DBT skills series, dialectical behaviour therapy. Come on, Elliot. All right, so if you're still listening right now, you are one of the true believers. And can I just say, I love you all. I don't know if anyone is still listening at this point, but, this last sort of bit of this episode is for you guys, the ones that have held on for this long. So all this stuff, it's coming back in a big way. I just need to be able to devote the energies towards it again. But it's coming. It is. I've had to back off, just about everything for a while to get this transport thing up and running again and get back into the industry and do it properly. That was always going to take up just about all of my energy, all of my capacity, all of my focus. But, it's now time to balance things out again and get back to the fundamentals of my mental health advocacy, the research, and the promotion of lived experience. All right, I'm keen, I'm excited. And as I said, if you're still listening right now, I reckon you might be excited as well to hear something other than what I've been going on about the last couple of episodes. Because, like I said, that is the obsessions that I've been preoccupied with for a fair while now. So I'm actually looking forward to that changing to something else. Like, it's never usually a good thing, but something different would be nice. All right, everybody, that's enough. That's it. I'm done. I do thank you all for listening. I do appreciate it. As we know, of course, if you're enjoying the show, feel free to like, subscribe, give the show a great rating. You can share it around with your mates, of course, and people who may gain something from it. And you can follow the show on Instagram at thedysregulated.podcast. That's another thing that'll be coming back soon is Dysregulated Daily. And you can also follow the show on Facebook by searching for the Dysregulated Podcast. So that'll do from me. I've got so much more to say, but I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time here on the Dysregulated Podcast.